Pronto.
Yes, I'm putting the name of the...
Bonjour. Buenos dias. Good morning. Buongiorno. Guten Morgen. I am not going to say that.
Et comment on dit en Samoa?
Huh?
Comment on dit bonjour en Samoa?
Save it for me.
Oi.
For me, I'll tell you.
Ah, ok, thank you. Bon dia. Bon dia. Bon dia.
Je vais attendre que Sainte Brigitte. Brigitte est de bonne humeur aujourd'hui. Ben, elle est toujours de bonne humeur. Mais aujourd'hui, elle est particulièrement de bonne humeur. C'est que son garçon et son mari arrivent dans quelques heures. Hein? La mujer et la mamá muy feliz. Muy feliz. C'est un grand jour. It's a very important day. Very, very important day in our week. Une journée très importante dans une autre semaine. Vous vous souvenez, mardi, Gilles Routier nous parlait de la position basse, la vie cachée, la vie ordinaire, la vie de tous les jours, et que c'est dans la voie cachée, el camino abajo, où on devient catalyseur d'action, de transformation, des acteurs de fraternité. Comment apporter de l'humanité dans le monde d'aujourd'hui? Comment réhumaniser un monde déhumanisé? Pour ce faire, nous avions pensé d'inviter quelqu'un de spécial, un conférencier de renom dans sa communauté et partout chez nous, Tom Dearhouse. Je ferai une biographie en anglais et je la ferai rapidement en français, en espérant qu'en espagnol, ça soit suffisamment clair. And if I make any mistakes, you know what to do. Tom has Kenyan, Kehaka, and Anishinaabe ancestry. He's employed by the Kanawake community. I'm not sure if I can get this right, brother. Shakotia or Shakotia? Takinhas? Since 2001, over 20 years. He's been a youth protection caseworker. He's been a support counselor. And for the last 7 years, as a traditional support counselor for his greater community. Tom has all the talents. He has been journalist, firefighter, ambulance technician, and band council chief. He brings traditional knowledge and practices and life experiences to both work and personal life. having absorbed through personal experience and through professional experiences, stories and teachings through oral tradition. As a helper, he uses the Mohawk creation story, the story of the great peacemaker and the great law of peace, along with the cycle of ceremonies. A trauma-informed approach is used and complemented by the use of various appropriate ceremonies. You would think that his schedule is filled enough, but no. Tom finds more time. He finds time to be an elder and cultural resource to Montreal's greater Indigenous population and all of its related organizations. These include, this is very important, these include 3 homeless shelter sites and a newly opened family clinic. And as he is showing today, he is on a world tour, accepting invitations here and beyond to open conferences and gatherings, especially regarding Indigenous issues, healing, and reconciliation. We thought it was important that Tom be here because he embodies our history. And in our national history, in the history of our country, there was division, there was hate, there was a fracture. But through a slow walking process of contact or recontact and dialogue and reconciliation, we thought that maybe that can serve as an example for the encounter of the other here and around the world. Tom vient de la descendance de Canyen, Kehaka et Anishinaabe. Il est employé du centre communautaire Kanawagé, Shakotia Takenhas Community Services depuis 2001, plus de 20 ans. Il est en quelque sorte un travailleur social pour la jeunesse, un conseiller de soutien auprès de cette population et depuis les 7 dernières années agit comme un conseiller traditionnel, si vous voulez, dans sa communauté. Tom a un horaire extrêmement chargé et il a tous les talents. Il a été journaliste, pompier, technicien ambulancier et chef de bande pour sa communauté, sa nation. Il utilise des coutumes et des rites qui lui permettent de préserver et de partager la connaissance traditionnelle de sa communauté dans son monde de travail et dans sa vie personnelle. Tout ça en utilisant une tradition orale, comme nos propres ancêtres, la tradition orale. Tom est un guérisseur en utilisant l'histoire de la création du peuple Mohawk, l'histoire du grand peacemaker en français. Comment? Le grand artisan de paix. Merci Yvonne. Et la grande loi de la paix. en utilisant aussi une variété de cérémonies traditionnelles adaptées pour chacune de celles-ci. C'est un homme occupé, c'est un sage dans sa communauté, c'est un rôle extrêmement important dans la structure de la communauté comme telle. Et il est sans aucun doute une ressource, une pierre angulaire dans le Grand Montréal et dans le Québec entier pour tout ce qui touche les populations indigènes, autochtones et les organisations qui en sont rattachées. Il est impliqué dans 3 maisons de sans-abri et une nouvelle clinique de médecine familiale. Comme vous le voyez aujourd'hui, Tom prend de son temps à lui pour venir dans des rassemblements comme le nôtre pour nous sensibiliser, développer un dialogue, mais surtout développer une forme de communion avec les autres. Il est un homme de paix. He's a peacemaker. Je termine en vous disant pourquoi Tom est ici aujourd'hui. On pensait important que Tom vienne nous parler un peu de l'histoire de sa nation par rapport à la nôtre et notre histoire commune et démontrer comment les fractures du passé peuvent être un terroir, une amorce pour une forme de contact, de dialogue et de renouveau, une forme de réconciliation, avec l'espérance que notre histoire nationale à nous, qui est bien typique à nous, peut s'appliquer dans les pays, un peu dans le monde entier. Dernier point, j'ai demandé à Tom de m'enseigner un mot. I asked Tom to teach me one word when we first met. Et il m'a enseigné le mot « gwe » ou « gwe-gwe » qui signifie « frère ». Alors, gwe, Tom?
Can you say Sego Skanagoa? This one is, are you of the great peace? Do you still have the great peace? Can you say what Guanu Aladu? That's a large one. That's a more formal greeting. And so I would say Sego Zawagwego, what Guanu Aladu Neidi Il Saint Bernard. Welcome to Il Saint Bernard. If you want to know a funny history or a bit of trivia, Ganawage claims Il Saint Bernard is part of the seigneurie land claim back in Louis XIV's time, the French regime, seigneurie system. He never set foot in North America, Louis XIV, but he granted land for the use of the Christian Indians. Ganawage was the land of the praying Indians early on. And so it's nice to be here. I don't think we're going to get the land, but it's up at a higher political level to have that land or services or back rent paid to the Ganawage Mohawks. This came out when I was a band council chief, the land claims, and it's still ongoing. But anyway, I thank you for the introduction. It sounds good on paper, and there's true stories in there, but also other challenges that everybody faces in life. I think I want to tell you about my upbringing, which can be examples of challenges for one, but also in different paths, but also one of fraternity and just belonging, a sense of belonging and a connection to one's own people and others. And always in a relationship, there's values. There's values of peace, respect, love, compassion. Sometimes it doesn't come easy. You have to work at it. But so about myself, I was born to indigenous parents. My father was Ganyanga Haga, and my mother was Anishinaabe. And I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, USA. Urban life until the age of 21. I went through the Catholic school system of Detroit, and one significant event was when it was time for high school. I was offered or given advice to try this high school called University of Detroit High School, a college prep school run by the Jesuits, Society of Jesus. Now, this was a different path altogether than my friends, because there was a closer high school to where I lived, and all my friends went there. But I applied, did the interview, and got accepted into this U of D High, all-boys school. Now, does that sound familiar, like a fraternity? I got to know them, Jesuits and lay teachers, liberal arts education, 4 years of Latin and all of that classical kind of education. But funny story, we also, early on, freshman, sophomore year, had a running joke about what the SJ stand for, these Jesuits, SJ. We said, that stands for a soft job. Little did we know later, junior, senior year, that's actually some rigorous training. And it appealed to some so much that they actually went to seminary, and some of my classmates became Jesuit priests. I, on the other hand, being in the Motor City that Detroit was known for, thought I would try the engineering program. I'll make a long story short to say I like the sciences, but the calculus and the higher physics, I was not successful in the mechanical drawing, not up to their standards, and I was soon dropping out and actually failed a few classes and dropped out after about 2.5 years. As fate would have it, a significant event, opportunity appeared that I could come to the reserve here in Ganawage, my father's reserve, where we often came for vacations. And I was taking care, or we stayed at my father's aunt and uncle, and they were getting older, and they were taking turns going into the hospital. And they actually needed a caregiver for the immediate, this was August 1984. You can do the math and figure out how old I am in a way. But that opportunity presented itself. 1 month passed. My uncle was in a wheelchair, double amputee. I was doing cooking, and a place to stay. My auntie was often in the hospital too, diabetes, unstable. But they lived for, 4 or 5 more years with me there, and eventually I stayed. It turned out that I stayed. It sounds a bit romantic to say I retraced the roots of my father's history back to my own Mohawk people. It sounds good. It's true that I did do that, but made foolish decisions as young men do, got off the path, but that's where the challenges come in. You're being pulled in different directions by society and by my peers and so on. But during that time after 85, you may know heard of the Knights of Columbus. There is a chapter. It's actually a social club in Ganawage, but we're associated with Lachine, Quebec, and the council is 1776, which knowing U.S. history, that's the U.S. Independence Day, the Independence Year. So being a social club, I was very sociable. And the church was not so much involved, although we were linked to the St. Francis Xavier Mission. We were supposed to be supporters, defenders, attendees of church. I was inconsistent, but the one thing that kind of was an influence on me, it was definitely an influence, was when I met my first wife. Her father, who happened to be a Anishinaabe, so my first wife was a Anishinaabe Mohawk, see the connection there. Her father was studying to be a deacon in the Roman Catholic Church. And he had to travel for the training to a place called well, it's by a couple of names. Anderson Lake, Ontario, Spanish Ontario, which happens to be a location of a residential school that many Mohawks were shipped out to in the 50s and 60s. So imagine that. It seems to be a conflict. Why is this area, why would they go back almost into the belly of the beast, back to face this area? And the Jesuit is Jesuit run also. But there was a great appeal to this, and many Anishinaabe, his cohort, there were many deacons ordained. And in this situation, they worked in the communities. And my father-in-law, Ron, still alive, he's 84, was ordained to work specifically in the community of Ganawage. He wasn't born there, he was born in Ontario, and he likes to joke he was kidnapped by the Mohawks. He met his first wife up in residential school, got married at 16, 17, got married, had the whole class, the school there as witnesses, and they made a life, and he went on to have 6 children, iron worked all across Canada and the U.S., following that kind of tradition of iron work and the construction trade. So this was an influence, but not so much that I wanted to be a deacon or ordained, but there was an appeal because you could see how he was. He was open, liked to meet people. Apparently the residential school experience didn't affect him that bad, or he had worked through some things where he didn't hold any kind of grudges against the priests, or any religious for that matter, but he said we're all trying to, basically we're all walking each other home, if you know what I mean. We're walking in this life for a while. Why carry a grudge? Why carry that heaviness when we're all trying to have a good life? The Anishinaabe have a saying, they often bring this phrase up, "Mino b'madzuin." We're all trying to have a good life. And the life means working on ourselves, working on reconciliation, working to heal. And I guess I can mention at this time, if you think there's a shortage of residential school survivors, around here there's only a handful in Ganawage. Well, if you go further west, Winnipeg, and go west, there's many residential school survivors. I would say, well, in the thousands, I would say, and they're all in remote communities. But I was at a gathering in Winnipeg. It was like an airline hangar size of this Winnipeg Convention Center, where there was hundreds of residential school survivors, and not only that, their families. And so there's intergenerational survivors, we'll call them. And these are the people that I also work with, the people who are, they've lost their parents, but they still carry that. It's a transfer of the hurt and the pain and the trauma. But there's ways to work through that through a spiritual approach, and that's what's meant by this trauma-informed approach. This is what's meant. This is where the ceremonies come in and the teachings and so on. But back to my little timeline really quickly. Got involved in the community. Knights is a fraternity. Values are fraternity, unity, and charity. Later on, there's another degree, another level of Knights of Columbus. It's called the 4th degree, and they add the value of patriotism. Back in the day, they were very, how should we say, we had our uniform of a chapeau with a fancy feather and swords and capes, kind of reminiscent of olden times, Christopher Columbus. And isn't that an interesting comparison or to lay it out? An indigenous community following Christopher Columbus, and whereas later in my schooling you found out the explorers who got lost or came to North America were a part of the start of colonialization, and things went bad for a while, killing and so on, and the misuse and injustices. But that's where I find myself, and even today, which I'll kind of get into more towards the end, is where I find myself. Western knowledge, study social work, but also really appealing and connected to It was mentioned oral tradition. There's teachers still today who know the language, who have what would be called maybe an alternative view of health, but that involves medicine work, it involves dream work. So there's a certain skill set if you know, say, a creation story or the peacemaker story. Modern day, we find ourselves, again, in the creation story, and you can do it from a spiritual point of view or a medicinal lens, I guess a medicine lens or a language lens, and all the things that happened in creation, all the things that happen today has already been done. Most of it has been, I would say all it's been done in creation story, and they've all worked through it to present day, and it's still relevant, and the peacemaker story is still relevant, and the idea of a confederacy and 50 chiefs, very much relevant, and I can cover that because I had an experience that's still impacting me and resounding inside of me at the present moment. This happened a few weeks ago. So fraternity, I wanted to mention there was a time period after I got married, 1991, and I went on a retreat weekend, and maybe some of you have heard, maybe the Spanish community, if you ever heard of Cursillo movement. That was very trendy and popular and well attended in Montreal. So the Montreal Catholic community was very active, say 85 to maybe 2,000, and I got involved in the men's weekends, putting on men's weekends, the Royals, the Talks, the Ultreas, the Moving Forward, group reunions, and all of that. So that's another example of just bringing the values, bringing my gift or something I could offer, which seemed to be, again, along indigenous lines, indigenous meeting, Western meeting brothers and sisters, and people wanted to know about it. And so my father-in-law was there. I was often by his side. There was other community members who felt the same way. They were of the same mind of healing, reconciliation, and getting along. And that went well for a while until the movement kind of died out for various reasons. But it's still a memory, and the principles of that are something I still remember. They really stress the personal contact in the groups. The little group tables, you get to know each other, and then group reunions. And when we get back to a reunion, it's like we just get caught up on things. It's like we never left. And so the values of this weekend, connecting to Jesus and connecting to creation and connecting to the God as we know, was a strong influence. I'll kind of touch on, so after I talked about the Cursillo movement, 2000, I'll go backtrack a little bit to 1990. You may have heard this on the news. This was a time of the Oka crisis. A short distance from here is Ganasadage, and the fight was over land. Oka wanted a golf club. The Mohawks didn't want it. It was actually on a tribal cemetery. But even put that cemetery aside, the land, they weren't consulted. And so in solidarity, blockades went up on the Mercier Bridge and our territory in solidarity with Ganasadage. It lasted 78 days, much news coverage, many documentaries. If you like the National Film Board, you can get our documentaries on that. Alanis Obamsawin is a famous documentary maker who did about 5 or 6 in a series. But this was a time too where I got to hear about another type of fraternity, more along traditional lines, warrior society. Now, warrior society, if you mention this picture, you can imagine people in masks, blocking their face, camouflage gear, often carrying a weapon. It's true this happened, but there's more to it. If you go under the surface, you know that you become aware that these warriors, these men were directed by clan mothers and their communities. And that's in traditional approach or traditional look. Men have their societies and women have their roles. And they're supposed to be working together. Men have the role to be protectors, to be defenders, to be providers, and the women are in charge of the household and the children, and kind of give direction in a good way to the men working together. This would be in longhouse lifestyle. You might hear the term Haudenosaunee. Haudenosaunee means people of the longhouse. And when this is working really well, people know their clans, Bear Clan, Turtle Clan, Wolf Clan. You don't marry into your own clan. You marry outside of your clan. And then when the children are born, the children follow the mother's clan, so it follows the mother's line. And this just strengthens up the relationship. It binds everyone together when it's working well. And back in the day, before 1500s, 1600s, longhouses were actually places to live. And I was interested to see the first topic of the week, a common house. The longhouse was a common house for families. But not only that, there could be renovations, in a sense. You could add to the rafters. You could add to your family. And these family members were all bound together, again, by values of love and peace and respect. Not just family bonds, and then it gets into a community perspective. It gets into a more collective, just a binding relationship of everyone working together in a good way for the betterment of the community. So I'll tell you about Ganawage a bit. A community of 9,000. It's a territory, 10 by 10 roughly. But if the seigneurie land claim went through, as it is, Ganawage would triple in size. Ile St. Bernard would be Ganawage, St. Philip, St. Constant, St. Catherine, our neighbors, would be also in the territory. Don't know if that's going to happen, but it's a nice idea. But again, it's working together about this. Yes, slow.
Just the pace, just to give the people in the back a chance.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
I'll take a break. Go on this one.
Just burn it. Just burn it.
Oh,
Closer to you.
it's extended to the maximum. So I'm not going to repeat everything. Sorry about that.
Why don't you start over?
No, I can't do that. Don't say that because I could probably do it. Does the camera need to be adjusted? No, good. And so I was talking about Ganawage, and this is what I know, what's come to me traditionally. Men's societies still exist. Medicine societies still exist, exclusively for men, for healing, and the women have their own societies, but they always work together. And when I first heard about St. Charles de Foucauld and the fraternity, I did a little reading on it. I'm just worried about, and I don't think you do this, but I worry about the idea of any fraternity kind of taking a paternalistic behavior to the people that they serve, so I caution about that. And we do it ourselves, Mohawks. We try to take over. We be assertive, bordering on aggressive. That's what we know, but we had to be at the time because we're on the eastern side of our territory, so we encountered the Dutch, we encountered the British, we encountered the French, and we were tough because we had to be. On the opposite side of the Confederacy in New York State, there's the Seneca Nation. Senecas also had to be warrior-like and be big-time defenders from the people that they met coming from the West. But it's really, the way I look at fraternities, it's infused with values. Everyone has to have the values of, and you just determine what your purpose is. It's going to be done in peace. It's going to be done with love, compassion, and this is the great law of peace. When spoken in the language, has all these values, descriptive words in the language. And Mohawk would say peace is skana, love is ganukwatsuda, a good mind is a common theme in all kind of actions. A good mind is gatnigurio, to have a good mind, and you make good decisions. Another one is compassion, or just this, compassion, gadaru. Gadaru is compassion for your fellow human beings. So whatever group you're a part of, fraternity, any kind of group, it's going to have these values, and you do that, you act accordingly. So many things I could say. One thing comes to mind, a recent teaching that seems to fit where I am today. It was taught by a Anishinaabe professor. She says there's 4 things present day. We recognize the system today is unfair or has injustices. So what do we want to do? Indigenous people, sure, we want to protest. And she described it this way: we want to unsettle the system. We want to make corrections, but not rash decisions like putting up a blockade and blocking buildings. Not do it that way. But we also need help. So she includes, for lack of a better word, the European settlers to join indigenous protesters and unsettle. So the European settlers become unsettlers of a system, whether it be political, whether it be educational, justice, healthcare, and so on. And particularly, I would say, religious institutions. They're not going anywhere, and if you choose not to be involved in a church, then get involved in something that is good for you, and the Longhouse lifestyle is a good one. There's other churches also. It's your choice, but we're all kind of in this together in the community, and very much having a relationship with the outside. This is indigenous people's relationship to the non-indigenous. There's a second point, and this is mainly for indigenous people. We want to reclaim what is ours, and that involves language, involves customs, ways of doing things that were lost, kind of integrate them into modern day life. Again, this is values, and this seems to be part of what our community wants. Revitalize language. It's kind of connected to native nationalism, really thinking of a nation, but this is enough to bring back our ways, consensus building, and all these Mohawk ways, Ganyangahaga ways. Everyone has a voice, which, by the way, you may know this, the United States kind of met with some of the Mohawk leaders, Ben Franklin, Jefferson, and some of these U.S. forefathers, kind of developed the U.S. Constitution based on the Mohawk way of doing things and the Confederacy, and very much nation-to-nation meetings. It evolved into something other than that later on, but the principle, we still kind of follow that principle, whereas the United States went on to do their own thing. The third point of this professor's approach, so the first one is unsettling actions, second one is reclaiming, third one is rebuilding a relationship. We have to admit that there's a lot of rebuilding to do. With residential schools still in mind of people, and the generation following still remembers that school and have a hatred of the church building and the clergy and anyone associated with that, even though They never actually hurt them or been on the receiving end of anything, but they carry that grudge, or we'll call it, they carry that trauma, they carry that hurt. So rebuilding, and how do we rebuild? It's very much indigenous, non-indigenous meeting, personal contact, dialogue, again with the values, those who want to talk together, those who have a calling or a life's purpose or a role to be mediator, resolving conflict, or just talking to get to know. A priest told me this in the Bible, love your neighbor just like yourself, as you love yourself. He said in Hebrew it's slightly different. Love your neighbor, he's just like you. So that gave me a little comfort. He's just like me. Yeah, with all our fears, I call it fears, worries, concerns, but a desire to do good, desire to have a good life, and to be in peace, and to try and get along. And this happens in small areas, small pockets. We know it happens on small levels. Wouldn't it be nice to have it on a bigger level where it's actually community to community? Can it be nation to nation? Remains to be seen, but it's very much a work in progress. And the fourth part of the professor's point was just actions that are in line with the rebuilding, infused with the values of rebuilding and reclaiming, and not to act out of spite, not to act out of vengeance, but to have this peace. And so many teachings on the peace. Peace is not just the absence of war, it's working on yourself to look at yourself and ask, are you at peace with yourselves? It's a two-parter. Are you at peace with yourself with what you've done? And are you at peace with yourself with what has been done to you? That comes up now and again. And if it's not, then you're going to have to take some actions to work on that. I'm not sure how I'm fixed for time. Feels like 45. I want to talk about my summer. My summer, I was fortunate enough through work to attend what's called the Great Law of Peace Recital. Over 6 days, listening to the peacemaker story in the language of the Seneca, Mohawk, Onondaga, Cayuga in the morning, and then the afternoon. Some of us need translation in English, but it's still very powerful to hear the story, and to give you an idea for Mohawks and anyone of the Iroquois Confederacy. There's 5 other nations. Peacemakers considered the greatest statesman, the greatest mediator, resolving conflict, grief counselor, putting things together, having a good mind in spite of obstacles, in spite of resistance, to establish 50 chiefs that still exist today prior to European visits, European settlers, still exists. And as a further symbolism or this relationship being entrenched present day, there's wampum belts on display. Some wampum belts date from 1613, something called two-row wampum. And after that, that's two-row wampum is the two purple perpendicular paths on a white background, and one represents native, indigenous path, one represents non-indigenous path, working together on this, working and walking together on the river of life, traveling together, yeah. The other wampum belt that's significant, one of the earliest wampum belts, is the Hiawatha belt. This is white on a dark purple background representing 5 nations, and it later became 6 nations. But you see that on bumper stickers and flag. Although we didn't have flags, these wampum belts are significant. A lot of teachings to make a wampum belt out of the little shells. And really a simple teaching is, if people it's a sign that a culture is doing well. If a culture or a village is doing well, if they have time to make wampum beads out of shells and put them together, it means all their basics are covered. Food, security, housing, the land, not at war with anyone. They have time to put these together to commemorate the meeting with the Dutch, 1613. Hiawatha is sometime after 1640, let's say, describing the unity. There's about 10 or 11 actual belts that were also on display representing relationships with the Ganyangahagan and Anishinaabe, sometimes the colonial governments. They were colonies at the time. They developed a skill to put together wampum belts and other gifts to give to the Mohawk Nation, to give to Seneca Nation. So they seem to be on board for this nation-to-nation relationship. And the last thing I'll mention, I was very impressed with, it's a silver pipe, about so long, very skinny, a small bowl for tobacco. And it dates from 1769, given by the colonies. I'm not sure which one, but if I'm not mistaken, this is called like the Silver Covenant Chain, an agreement that the colonies, well, first the colonies said, we're giving this to you, and we're entering in a relationship. It's going to be really good. We'll be the fathers, and you'll be the sons, and we're going to take care of you, and so on. But then the Indian chief said, no, rather we view it like this. We're going to be brothers to brothers. We're on the same level. We have our way of doing things. We accept your gift with this one condition, that we're going to be on the same level. And like this silver pipe, it tarnishes over time. So every once in a while, we're going to gather and we're going to polish it up symbolically, but also physically, and recall the events that happened on this date, and strengthen the relationship and renew our bonds, because eventually the old ones who were present are going to pass on, and it's up to the children and their ancestors, the coming generations, to remember the relationship that we have. So this was, and it was striking the first day that it came out. The pipe was tarnished, laid on the table, and there's actually security, so nothing happens to watch over the belts. You're not really supposed to touch it because the oils on your fingers can damage the already threads of elm bark and so on and sinew. But the following day, the chiefs polished it, so it wasn't the same pipe. It was nice and shiny, and kind of just a little symbolism of how it doesn't take much just to, well, it's a little effort there to do the actual shining. It's more work to put in the effort to have people come to an understanding. And that's the main thing, I guess, in any kind of endeavor, fraternity work, Knights of Columbus work, Men's Society. You have to put in the work, the effort, to get your results. And you have to take the time necessary to come to a consensus, to come to a certain direction of things, but to hang in there and not to get frustrated. And I'll share this little tidbit that ceremony time is really from sunrise to about noontime. That's the time to do ceremony. That's time to really do productive work. You can still go afternoon, but then towards supper time, you're getting into the time of, well, I should have elaborated this. There's two twins. One, the creator twin, had the morning, another, or the daytime, let's say, and the other twin had the nighttime. All to say is, creator's time is sunrise to about noontime. And then you break. Because if you go much longer, well, I guess they knew, our ancestors knew, sometimes frustration gets in the way. We get tired, but we have to rejuvenate and start again and pick up. So you take the time necessary to get your business done. And it still kind of exists to this day of ceremony time, and it seems to work. The cycle of ceremonies happens really for us. Most of the year it's a day or two. Midwinters is like midwinter time festival ceremony is one of the bigger ones. kind of lasts for 6 days, mid-January. That's like our New Year's. That's life present day. This is where I find myself. And I just want to give you kind of encouragement. I didn't know what to expect, seeing the audience. But what I found in my experience, I admire and respect people who commit their lives to a certain lifestyle, who make a commitment or a vow. So I admire the Jesuits. I encounter the Oblates. I know the provincial of the Jesuits. They're in Montreal. I know the provincial of the Oblates through my work on a national committee. I'm a part of Our Lady of Guadalupe Circle. I'm committed for another 3-year term as a co-chair. But I admire this, and I admire anyone who kind of devotes their life, because the values just come through. The love just comes through a person. We can see by their works. Yeah. And one example that comes to mind, just popped into my head, involves the homeless shelters. Been doing it 3 years, but apparently they talk, the residents, and talk. And sometimes they're under the influence, sure. But everyone, I think, if they're asking for prayers, you give it to them. The homeless, if they ask for a prayer, or they ask to be laid hands on them to say a prayer, I do that. And this is kind of different from my professional work, where I don't necessarily meet people who are under influence. We want them to be clean. Not that a ton do that, but so it's a little change in my thinking that everyone deserves that respect and dignity if they're asking for that. Because you never know, that may make a significant change in their life. And I guess you can answer for yourselves the different things that are significant for you. Things that you did differently from your peers. Now, I know there's things I did differently, followed a different path, and still kind of walk in 2 paths. But I'm okay with that, because that's kind of my life's purpose. And my traditional teachers say, we come from a place called up here, sky world, heaven, and the baby's actually, the spirit of the baby chooses their parents. I don't know if you've ever heard that. They choose the parent, choose where they're going to go, and then they make a life. They come from love. Hopefully they enter love, a loving relationship and family. But yet we know it doesn't happen. And so sometimes bad things happen to good people. We call those, my teachers say, those are life lessons to work through. And hopefully in that lifetime, they'll have completed that. There'll be an example of love and healing for others. And then they'll pass and they'll return to love. But if it doesn't happen, my traditional teachers say, well, they're bound to come back again at some point and relive and we work again at that life lesson that they have to, whether it be for themselves taking a wrong path, or their parents maybe were neglectful or had substance abuse issues or something. So that's something that we believe in. That's an approach that I use, and it seems to work and applies to communities. And it probably applies, but in your own way, in your own way of doing things, and your understanding of the relationship of your higher power and human beings. So I think I did a lot. I don't know if it makes sense, if the message comes through, but I hope it some of it kind of seeps into a place and rests gently on your heart and rests gently on your mind. And for sure, I'm going to stick around for a little while and probably answer some questions, and maybe that can bring some clarity also. So I'll end it there. I thank you for your time. Oh, I forgot the drum. Would you mind if I do like an energizer for you? It involves you too. I need your help to do this. Is it okay?
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I think I was distracted, or I went to the language first. I could have done it right after. But for the Ganyangahaga people, we have what's called Thanksgiving address. In ceremony time or big gatherings, we always do this, and sometimes it can be a half an hour. But don't worry, I'm not going to do a half an hour. But I can, and sometimes I do like a little animation or what do you call that? Icebreaker, energizer at the morning, and I find it works well. It helps the airflow and everything. So this is a song that I do. It's like the morning song when the sun rises, and it's just chants, but maybe you can pick this up, and I want you to give it a try. I'll just sing it a few times through. It's giving thanks in a general way to the morning song, to the morning sun as it rises, and it kind of encourages a good day. So here's how it goes. I'll sing it once through, and maybe you can pick it up after. Hopefully it comes through on the song. One more time, big finish. When they are home, when they are home, when they are, oh, hey, oh, yeah, yeah. Good one, good. With a little practice, we can take that on the road.